Hello and welcome to the Wolf Digest covering Day 3 of CES 2019. I am your host, Ammaross.
And I am your co-host, Terkanil. Today, we have a few topics, but really, we're going to focus on the one that we were waiting for the most.
Oh, yeah.
AMD. So, that was roughly an hour and a half keynote. And while a good, half an hour of it, maybe the first half bit there was just, here's all the stuff that's happened before. It was what came after that we were looking for. But it was like the last half an hour or so that was the part that we were really waiting for. Even though it didn't get a whole lot out of it, but it was more just saying, well, there's proof. So let's start at the top here. And really the first thing that came up after Dr. Lisa Su got into, saying, here's what we've got, it was a new Radeon. Not a Vega, a Radeon.
Well, to be fair, the leaks were that it was a V with two vertical bars in it. And so everyone's thinking, oh, Vega 2. It's going to be a Vega 2. Well, it was based on Vega, but they called it a Radeon 7.
7. VII.
Yep.
So if you take the trademark that appeared and actually broke it out, VII. So we're entirely off the mark there.
Yeah, we just assumed wrong. We didn't think of no Roman numerals. Well, we did. We thought the 2 Roman numeral. So like
discard that V because it's Vega.
Yeah, it was the same V as in Vega, but whatever. It worked out. I think they even called it Vega once in a while there too. So
might be a Vega type part under the hood. So
well, it's based on the original Vega. It's just revised and shrunk for 7 nanometer, and so they called it a Radeon 7 as the official branding, and they spelled that VII. So,
but overall, the specs and what they were showing off weren't that bad. I mean, it's got a lot of memory available to it. However, it's very expensive memory.
Well, yeah, it's HBM memory. And I'm pretty sure this is either Gen 2 or even Samsung's slightly enhanced version of HBM2.
And the real problem with HBM is it comes at a premium.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've always had problems with not necessarily yields, but just getting a lot more HBM out of it. So it's always had a significant premium. But it is extremely nice RAM, too. I mean, this gives you 1 TB per second, which is roughly, twice what the RTX cards provide. I think theirs are in the 650 gigabit per second.
I cannot personally remember.
Yeah, I think the 2080 is like a 650, just shy of 7 kind of range. But they give 60 compute units, 25% more performance at the same power, and 16 gig of this HBM, which is just a phenomenal amount of desktop graphics or kind of stuff.
And what they're putting out means that this card can still put out quite the amount of performance. I mean, what we're talking here was putting it in the range of like the 2080. So they're at the very least catching up. They actually demoed a couple of games with this card. Devil May Cry 5, which actually hasn't yet been released. And that will be effectively a launch title connected with the card.
Yep.
Is at least what I was getting out of it. And they were also showing off a couple other. What was the other game?
Well, they did a racing game later, but they also showed streaming, some kind of seafaring, something or other. No, the Division 2.
Division, that's right. Division 2.
That's actually going to be a launch title because they're giving it away for free with a Radeon 7, or if you buy a 2nd gen Ryzen 7 or 5. Of course, they gave one for free to everyone in the room, too, so maybe we should go next year.
Just do 2 for everyone. Yeah,
you
we
get a
actually
car
something
and
like
you
that.
get a car and you yeah.
In this case, it's you get a gaming, you get a gaming. So I want to
Everyone
play
gets
this.
a game. Yeah.
From what I was seeing about the Division 2, however, is that its base spec is really high.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah, and this thing
um,
handles it pretty flawlessly. I was watching it and they were running at like 110, 140 frames per second and they were running 4K. It was pretty nice.
so what they're showing, I mean, it looks nice. It certainly is pretty.
Yep.
But it's gonna be. But again, then there's the fact. The other half that coin, however, is the price point. Like we said, that RAM is expensive, and this card they're tossing the price of, benchmark better right around the $700 mark.
Yeah, and to be fair, if you go and look at the 2080, you will find prices that range anywhere from maybe 720 to 740 on sale.
No,
Although
there actually are some right now for 700. I actually double checked that.
good. And there's a bunch of aftermarket ones that just go up from there. So if you want to look, I mean, they did show 3 probably cherry picked titles where this card was exactly on par, right down to the same FPS as a 2080, with one title where they are actually ahead by a few percentage points. So we'll have to wait and see what the actual benchmarks come back as. But
It won't be that long. We're looking at 2 to 3 weeks since this thing releases on February 7th.
yeah, February 7th for $700. And of course, that's going to vary depending on what the actual seller decides to list it as. I'm hoping that they don't pull an Nvidia and list it $100 more expensive for the first 3 months.
Well, from the if that were the case, however, from the sounds of it, that means it would go down after that. So,
oh yeah. But
and the thing itself isn't pretty, and what they're showing off sounds like it'll be a card directly from, at least what they're showing was the directly AMD card. So then we get see how the the partners will get a hold of it and what they'll end up doing with it. So we could end up seeing better versions of this come out, and then just a matter of if it's going to be more or less.
Yeah, and depending on the types of fans they put in this thing, it looks pretty equivalent to like Gigabyte's WinForce 3 card. So it would take quite a significant improvement in the aftermarket to provide something better than what is coming stock on this thing. And it looks like also, by the way, they have 2 8-pin PCIe connectors on the top of the card. So it's definitely going to draw a significant amount of power if you want to overclock it. But the fact that they provide you with those 2 8-pins gives you that ability to deliver that kind of power, as opposed to maybe a 2080 that doesn't have all of that connected. You wouldn't be able to push it to that kind of power usage without having some problems with the delivery.
Yeah, but that's not exactly the most power hungry card on the market. I mean, there's something I might jump into later, just that was being shown off at CES. But that's from the other side of the fence. Anyhow, getting back to this. After that, they went through and talked a little bit about some of the things they've done with Epic, some things they've done in the data center. They even had a little footnote about a partnership project with Google. And then they finally got around to the juicy parts. Ryzen 3 series.
Oh, yeah. So,
and this is the part that we were hoping to hear good news about. And the short version is, at least for what they actually showed at CES, which was only a single chip, and they only talked about just that one unnamed chip.
Well, it was named. It was in Cinebench that they actually ran a live benchmark. They actually had 2 computers and hit go on each. And
you actually had a SKU name?
It said AMD ENG sample right there, 3rd gen Ryzen. So this was an engineering sample, and Lisa actually said this is an engineering sample and not the final clocks either.
Yeah, preview.
Yeah. And so maybe, probably not very likely, but it'll probably get an extra 100 megahertz or more from this engineering sample once they actually finalize it.
Yeah, what I meant is that it wasn't the actual SKU.
No, they did not give any kind of brand naming or any kind of that. So that's still anyone's guess. Lisa did overemphasize the fact that this was a product announcement. It wasn't a launch. It wasn't a paper launch. It wasn't any of that. And they explicitly stated that they will be actually giving us more information as time goes on, but they're shooting for a mid 2019 release. So what does mid mean? I'm assuming June, July kind of time frame, because Q3 sounds really bad. Saying Q3 sounds really bad, and so end of Q2 is probably more along the lines.
And so somewhere in there, that's all we really know. But what we do know about what they showed off is, based on the rumors that we've had, this is possibly what could be called a 3700 or 3700X.
Yeah, this is the 8-core, 16-thread, so it's directly comparable to the i9 9900K. And that's actually what they directly compared it to in Cinebench. And you can see here at the tail end of the run that they scored 2057 in Cinebench, and the i9 scored 2040. And that's actually right in line with what you would expect, because let me pull up this benchmark over at Overclock 3D. We can see here that an i9 9900K stock, which is what they ran, got a 2031 score. So they actually got a little bit better score on their run. And if you go and look at some other sites, you might even see something that tips into the 2070 range. It fluctuates kind of. But then they have an overclocked 9900K that actually got a 2187. So there's some wiggle room there if you are the type of, tuner that really wants to get the most out of it. The really interesting thing, though, is that the 2700X stock only gets 1836. And so they're actually going up 200 points. Actually, a little more than 200 points. It seems like they actually managed to get, at least in Cinebench, clock for clock or IPC single core performance.
Well, it's hard to say because I think the default is a multi-core run.
It is, and that's what they ran. But 8 cores on both CPUs, and they actually were slightly beaten by the Ryzen, which would suggest that either their SMT is slightly better or their IPC or effective single core performance is better based on clock speed. But we all know that the i9 has a phenomenally high base clock and a boost that goes up to 5. So if maybe it's a better sustained boost clock for all core. We don't know yet.
It's one of those things of it's early information, so we're going to have to wait and find out. But right now it looks good.
Yeah. Right now it's looking like their single core performance is on par with Intel, their 9900K, which is a phenomenal watershed moment, really. If they can actually maintain that, because we all know that Sunnycove is coming around, and that is going to provide a improved IPC. So hopefully Ryzen can be up to the task and keep pace with that.
Yeah. That one's unfortunately even then quite a ways out, so we don't even know how that will play out once it actually comes into a fold.
Yeah,
desktop.
we're not
build.
even going to see a 2-in-1 with Sunny Cove until holiday of 2019. So basically, Ryzen 4000 will be out around the time that they have to worry about Intel.
Yeah, so basically the Zen 2 Plus. Oh boy.
Yeah. And, they might even be jumping the Zen 2 Plus and going straight to Zen 3. I don't know.
It's possible, considering what we know about their.
That's what the rumor is.
Well, they've actually talked about their roadmap a little bit back at the Next Horizon event back in November, and they talked a little bit of how they, the new EPYC is running on the Zen 2, but they also talked about how they're actually, getting close to preparing to do testing for Zen 3, and they're already getting design work going on Zen 4.
Yeah, and so they could very easily leapfrog just a Plus series if the IPC improvement needs a boost or something like that, or if they're not going to do Intel's plus on a process node.
And it all kind of depends on how their Zen 3 ends up playing out, and how fast it comes, around to something being fully usable.
Yeah. Now, one thing that's notable, by the way, is if we look on the screen, they put the wattage of the chip directly on the screen, and the Cinebench benchmark was 133.4 watts on the Ryzen, and Intel burned 179.9 watts. That's a 34.8% difference. So we already knew that Ryzen 2 was power efficient in doing loads better than the i9, but this gives you the next gen on equal grounds as far as performance, because right now Ryzen 2 is slightly behind the i9, so having that power difference is kind of a moot point, but same performance, 35% power savings. That's significant, probably not to your average consumer, but to businesses and definitely in the server market. But that's one other cool reveal that they gave us today.
Well, if you look at also like for those of us who do workstation application or creative work, where we have our systems grinding away at stuff for hours.
Oh yeah, when I let my
that will pay off.
Yeah, when I let my workstation just grind away on a video or whatever, it can run for hours and hours and saving 50, 100 watts per hour. That can start to pay back over the lifetime of the chip by far.
One of the other things we found interesting is they're showing everything off is Lisa Su actually did show off the delidded chip.
Yep.
And there have been some talk as to how they're going to do it. A lot of people thought, it's just going to be, just a chip and nothing really special about it. And there's been a couple, such as the channel Adora TV, where it was discussed, they're probably going to use the chiplet design.
Yeah, he was the first to really posit the idea of chiplets and to actually leak that EPYC was going to be a chiplet CPU. And he also, in that same video, extrapolated that Ryzen may potentially be chiplet as well, thus giving great economies of scale to AMD to be able to get this chip out and make it affordable, but high performing as well. And he actually had some of his leakers or other sources come back and say they haven't seen anything to do with a multi-chip design for Ryzen. And so he kind of corrected himself in his next video saying, no, it probably isn't that way. And as a matter of fact, I have all these things that suggest that it's probably not. But here it is.
It's going to be interesting to see how he takes that one now.
Yeah, his next video is going to be great. He's going to be so chuffed with pride. He's going to be like, I knew it. I should have just
called it.
Yep.
Just
called
it.
I mean,
and the other thing that's actually kind of interesting about that the chip that was shown is, and this is something that a few others have, talked about, and several of the things I picked up so far have been somewhat negative, saying, "Well, why didn't they do more?" Well, they're just showing off at early engineering, and it's more just making. And when you're doing this kind of thing, it's basically a case of it works, right?
When you're
Good.
playing poker, you don't tip your cards, right?
And this case that they're showing here is in this chiplet design, we have the I/O die similar to the EPYC, and then we have the core chiplet.
Yep.
That's where our 8 cores are sitting on. And right below that is an empty space that could fit a second chiplet.
Well, the I/O die is the biggest die on the little CPU here. And so all that they need to do is maybe rotate the chiplet or put another one below it, and boom, you got yourself a 16 core.
And so they could easily just use that alternate space down there for, like I said, a second 8 core chiplet, or some other size of chiplet in there. And if we even look at some of the other, like Edward's idea of having like a Vega chiplet in there, that actually could be plausible.
Yeah, they could easily kick out an APU or something of that nature. So there is a lot of potential here, and it might just involve moving the dies around a little bit or not. There might be enough space.
Yeah, so it's going to be just interesting to see how this new design plays out once the actual 3000 series actually, fully comes to market.
What's also an interesting thought? In the leaks, they said that the supposed 3850 anniversary edition 16 core 32 thread Ryzen, the Ryzen 9, they had that as to be announced in May, which sounds like mid 2019 to me, right?
So is there any conferences in 2019 in that time frame?
I don't know.
It's Computex.
But that leak suggests maybe they're holding off the Ryzen 9 altogether and not going to announce it until they actually get near the launch. Because we still don't know what Intel is going to do this year. We have, based on what they did in their server Cascade Lake stuff, that they could very well just take some of their i7s and glue them together on a single chip and sell that as this new fandangled like 12 core 24 thread CPU. I don't know if they'll have the power budget to do it with the i9 and 9900K and come out with a 16, but had AMD announced months in advance that they were going to strap 16 cores into one of these, Intel might make a little more of an effort to try to get their i9 glued together like the lower end chips that they probably already are going to do this year. But even if they did, they're not coming out until October, like their usual cycle would predict.
Yep. So one thing to consider here for that middle of the year time frame, Computex is at the end of May, and therefore it goes into the beginning of June.
There you go. They could announce or actually have their launch on that
around that time.
That would be very interesting. I mean, we're going to definitely be listening to the rumor mills, be watching the usual channels that they have to go through approvals or certifications with to actually end up in stores. So there's always going to be movement in the channels that will be a telltale signal that they're going to launch something.
So I guess Computex is probably going to be our next wait for.
Yeah. And here's another cool little bit. Tom's actually was talking with one of their sources, and they're talking that older motherboards, we're talking 300, 400 series chipsets, may actually be able to unlock the PCIe 4.0 that the Ryzen 3s will support with a simple BIOS update. And
really?
And not only that part. There is one caveat. Because of how the tracing on the motherboard works, anything that goes past 6 inches is going to require new redrivers and retimers to support the faster signaling. So they're only going to be able to turn it on for the first X16 slot. So the video card slot at the top of the motherboard. And coincidentally, there's a little PCIe 1X or X1 right there at the top between the CPU and that slot. Hopefully that one will get enabled too, but that's a pie in the sky kind of thing. I think it's pretty cool that they might be able to support it on these boards retroactively anyway. That's a pretty cool functionality feature upgrade, and I hope my motherboard gets it, but nothing can really touch the speed of PCIe 4.0 at the moment. We're barely even getting between 2.0 and 3.0 of saturation. So the new Ryzen or Radeon 7 is probably gonna go well into that direction, though. I think it has some promise, especially with the 16 gig of RAM on it.
Yeah, once that thing actually hits, it's gonna be really fun to see between that and then the next when Ryzen's finally come out. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, we all knew that it was going to support PCIe 4.0 since the Epic announcement, because Epic supports PCIe 4.0 and they're using the same IO die that they're using in Epic. So we get that de facto.
Yeah, so at least right now, as I said, there wasn't a whole lot else we can really work off of. We only have limited information since that was all that was given, but it's one of those things that we can at least, bide our time with. And we know now that here's the list, that a lot of the stuff we've been hearing as rumors are true.
100%,
so,
yeah.
And while a lot of the, SKU rumors are still just that, we know that there is a high plausibility to a lot of them based on what we were shown today.
Oh, yeah. This definitely shows that some of the leaks out there are very, very accurate. And we just didn't get enough information at this point in time to really play off of that.
So we'll be watching over the next, 5 months to see when we get more information to play with. And as soon as we hear something, we're going to bring it up.
Yep. And I really hope it is 12 and 16 cores. I mean, as it is, these dies are just a single chip with the what would be probably a 14 nanometer IO die that's been probably fairly cut down from what it would be in an Epic. These are, I hate to say it, but almost reject parts, except for the CPU, the actual 8-core CPU cores on here. Those are probably pretty nicely binned, but these are inexpensive for AMD to make because they're already mass producing them for their higher margin markets and servers. I really don't see this chip being any higher than the $330 that they sold Ryzen 2 at.
Well, it's possible it could. It's hard. It's gonna. I might say, probably they could probably shoot for around the 400 to 500, but knowing AMD, they're going to be wanting to, ring Intel as best as they can, which means cut the price as low as they can get it.
Well, I mean, the i9 9900K was on Shell Shock on Newegg for $499 today. So
wait, I thought that was a start price.
Maybe it has been running at like $570 for the past little while, but it's at $500. It might come down. It probably won't, because Intel, I haven't really seen their CPUs on sale for more than like $10 off, hardly at all. But if they came out and launched this chip at a $450 or even a $400 price point, they might get some pushback, especially the closer they get to what the i9 is currently selling at. And it's unwarranted. I mean, it's the same performance. It's probably better in some worse in others. Heck, it might even be slightly worse in most. But if it's $50 cheaper, which one's the better buy?
Still $50.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're spending $450 on a CPU, why are you going to skimp that extra $50 to get something that's slightly worse? And that's the perception that they need to fight against. They either need to make it, $400 for a barely worse or on par in order to really get people to adopt it, because they're fighting against the Intel mindshare. But it's Intel.
Well, I mean, that PCI 4.0 selling point is still a selling point.
Yeah, they'll have some bragging rights with that. They'll probably have some better thermals due to the wattage, and it maybe even a bit of overclocking capability. I mean, the CPU is no longer right next to the memory controllers, and so you could overclock your RAM and probably not have thermal interference. I mean, there's a lot of different little tuning things that we might get out of it. It's kind of exciting.
But that's pretty much where we've gone with AMD today. And we've been reading a lot of news from a lot of places and checking out opinions from some of the other tech reviewers out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm literally looking at probably about a good 20 tabs in my browser all about AMD.
Yeah.
And there's even been a few other interesting comments I've found in here. Like one came from NVIDIA, where if we go back to the Radeon bit, I'm pretty sure that's what this is discussing. Jensen Huang was not impressed. He called the announcement underwhelming.
Well, yeah, it was, because the 2080 Ti is still going to be better performing, but that's a $1,200 card. That's twice what Vega costs. Or should I say Radeon 7?
According to this particular article, Huang was quoted as saying the performance is lousy and it's nothing new. And he also noted that it doesn't have the AI capabilities or real-time ray tracing.
Well, of course, it doesn't support GameWorks either, but
hasn't held back AMD all that much.
Yeah, because anything that did support GameWorks was, Hairworks and Witcher and things like that. Did anyone really miss it if they didn't have it turned on? Well, I'm sure everyone that
notice.
I'm sure everyone that turned it on with their NVIDIA promptly turned it off due to the amount of frame drop that they got. And that thing was pretty intensive and would cause their frame rates to just plummet. It just caused Radeon or AMD's GPUs to drop even more, and so it was a good marketing ploy.
So, that's just a couple of things that we've found otherwise. But AMD, as I said, was our biggest thing that we were looking forward to, and
yeah, we were impressed. I mean, it was pretty much what we were expecting. I don't think
what we were hoping for, at least to hear a little bit about.
Well, I don't think we were even dreaming of the equivalent single core performance. I think we were all just resigned to the fact it would be worse, but that we would get more cores out of it. That's why we were hoping for 12 and 16 cores, is because, well, the IPC is going to be slightly behind still, but we can make up for it with this overwhelming multi-core.
Yeah, brute force everything else.
Yeah. And we didn't get that. We got a matching single core or single thread performance and only 8 cores. So will they bring out 12 and 16? I hope, because that'll be really nice.
It's still possible, but again, all they did is show one chip as an unnamed engineering sample without any information about the 3000 series.
You know what? I just had a thought. You
What you
know,
got?
all the leaks that we're talking about, the Ryzen 9 and stuff, they never mentioned Threadripper, right?
They didn't.
What if Ryzen 9, 12, and 16 core ended up being Threadripper branded? Because it's got 2 die, just like Threadripper with the 2 die and 2 dead die. What if the Ryzen 9 ends up being Threadripper parts on an AM4 socket and they kind of abandon the Threadripper socket altogether?
Possible, but I almost wanted to say that they wouldn't, because Threadripper was a beefed up Ryzen, and it was floating somewhere between Ryzen and Epic.
Yeah.
So I would wonder if they're going to do something more to that effect, have it be a beefed up IO die, and have it laid out as if we're a cut down Epic.
Well, the benefit of Threadripper was that it had quad channel RAM because it was based on the Epic. So Threadripper had the quad channel. Epic now has 8 channel, so they might still have the cut down 4. They might.
It's all going to be, and it's going to be an interesting year.
They'll be able to put 4 chiplets in it at the very least and get up to 32 cores, but with full performance rather than the Threadripper 2 quasi performance due to 2 of the dies being without a memory controller. I mean, there's a little bit of tweaking they can do, a little bit of a niche that they can still shove Threadripper, but I don't know.
There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential.
But that was just a thought on off the cuff on why Ryzen 9 might not have been mentioned yet.
Well, we didn't even hear about 3 or 5 technically, or 7.
Yeah, we just heard about an 8 core, and
which fits in the 7 mark.
They probably used the 8 core because it was a head-to-head comparison to show off the single thread performance, and they didn't want to pull out their 12 core, run it against an 8 core, and be called unfair. Like a certain overclocked CPU we shall not name. The last thing they want is bad press or to come off as unfairly or disingenuously doing demos like certain blue company.
And AMD usually tends to stick and say, here's our defaults. Let's see, we got it. It's kind of, I don't know if you got the vibe, but when you're watching that little demo, you almost, if you actually were to watch Lisa Su, she almost had a look of, please don't break, please don't break.
Yeah, she looked over at the guys, is like, you two ready? You're ready, right? And they're probably nodding. Yeah, we run it like 5 times off screen, so yes, the number will come out ahead, we swear.
It's gonna be right in line.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things of, they're showing that a lot of times you can tell when it's more early samples and stuff like that, that the more nervous they are tells they are fairly certain what they're going to show is going to work correctly. At the same time, they aren't entirely certain.
Yeah.
So it's, come on, don't break, do it right, do it right.
Because we've all had our systems hiccup during a benchmark and cause the number to be worse than it probably should have been, just due to Windows deciding to search for Windows updates or who knows what, right? Benchmarking that should be disabled, by the way, but still.
As a just a random callback on things going wrong, if you look back mid 90s when Windows 95 came out, the launch event for Windows 95, they had a blue screen.
Yep, that was fun.
I got to watch that one firsthand. It was awesome.
Didn't they get a green screen of death on an Xbox demo?
Yep. But I for me personally, it was just being able to, I was actually at the Salt Lake launch event as a teenager. I was literally the youngest person there, and I got to see that firsthand. Because they had it being streamed everywhere, so I just got to watch it blow up. It's like, okay then,
laughing to yourself, yeah.
Just watching Bill Gates going blink blink. Well,
I think
Anyhow,
we've flogged this horse enough. Do you want to talk about your next thing that you actually picked out and liked in this
yeah, this
today's
was
CS?
yeah one of the, so I was moving past that. As I said, AMD was what we caught about a lot on, but there were other things out there that we both found interesting in one way or another. One of them, I tend to use a lot of wireless devices, especially hard, like mouse and keyboard and such. Like right now, I'm actually using a wireless headset, and one of the things I've had with some of the various devices is with regards to having trouble with connectivity, even sometimes short range, if there's too much interference in the air. And so one of the things that was being shown off at CES this year was from Corsair and some of their line of tech, starting with they were showing off starting with a mouse, what they're calling the Slipstream wireless. And so they have a spectrum of wireless they're using to try to ensure that their devices will always have connectivity and have a better range.
Yeah, they're using the 2.4 gigahertz range, which is a pretty common range for a lot of wireless devices in the home. It used to be for Wi-Fi 2 until the 5 gigahertz band opened up with wireless N and AC.
Yeah, the things that they were talking about is trying to make sure that the devices will have improved connectivity, especially in high
Noise
what you could call noise environments. And the environment that was like one of the videos I found was showing it off, and they said like we have all these devices going here, and I can go over here 15 feet away, and it's fine. I can still play Battlefield 5.
Yeah, and I remember using wireless mice 7 years ago and getting interference from the one other wireless mouse in the room. And my mouse would start jumping around and his would start jumping around. Yeah, it's kind of a problem. It's not so much that way anymore due to the improved protocols, but this works better to just get rid of that latency caused by those retransmits and whatnot by being able to intelligently shift frequencies, and it'll jump around on that 2.4 band to avoid other congested bands, kind of like how your wireless access point will automatically change channels based on which band is the most clean in your home.
And having devices that can keep up with that, even even in a lot of modern houses, that can still become a problem.
Turn
like
the microwave
here,
on and
well, as an example, and I know you've heard this, the other wireless headset that I've got, which is from Logitech,
yeah,
I've had problems with that. I've complained about it numerous times.
oh yeah,
Because either it would cut out briefly or it would completely disconnect from its receiver. And I would have a lot of interference with it, even if there wasn't a whole lot going on. And sometimes my range would vary from a couple of feet. Sometimes I'd be able to get to the other side of the house. Sometimes I'd be sitting here right at my desk with the receiver, literally 2 feet away, and lose connectivity.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'll admit the device I'm using now is better. But having something with what they're doing, showing off from Corsair, focusing on the direct input devices, which is what we're especially in the gaming, where if you're wanting to use wireless, having something can keep up with that and try to help beat through that interference that can come up is especially nice to see, and I'm going to be looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, I had used a wired mouse for the longest time because I didn't want to have that issue of the wireless signal having problems while gaming. And, if you're doing Twitch shooting and things like that on a first person shooter, the last thing you want is for your mouse to start skipping around because your batteries are getting low and the Wi-Fi signal isn't quite reaching as far as it needed to, or anything of that nature. And I still habitually put the receiver on a extended USB cable and bring it out and bring it near my keyboard so that it's pretty close to where my mouse is. But I'm looking at the hours of battery life here, and it says it has 45 hours on Slipstream or 60 hours on Bluetooth. And, you know, I wish that was better. And I currently use the G602 mouse, and that's 250 hours. And that I have it on just the normal power saving, and I can go 2 months on just a single pair of batteries, and I'll swap it out. I have rechargeable ones in it, so it makes it pretty easy. And there's a little switch that I can just flip it into gaming mode. It actually, it'll drain battery faster, but
is that the little thing on top?
Lazy. Yeah, that's the little switch on top.
Oh, I never touched that thing.
Yeah, if you leave it in green mode, it'll just conserve battery, and you won't have to swap batteries as much. You flip it up, and it goes into a blue mode, and it'll actually be a low latency gaming mode that will do more samples and use more power to make sure that the signal is robust.
I did not RTFM.
Yeah. I know, right? It's like, who reads the manual? But they're looking at selling this thing. Yeah, here it is. They have the Harpoon at $49.99, RGB Elite $59, Iron Claw $59. The Iron Claw is this one here with the silver and stuff. And
still, that's the prices aren't bad though.
Yeah, I mean the G602 is at $36.50 right now. Its MSRP
yeah, but it's
is
been out
$80.
for a little while.
Yeah, it's been out forever. And I don't know. I think it's a very hard mouse to beat. It would take someone that just doesn't like the grip of the mouse, which I'm that kind of a person that would just not like the grip of a mouse. And it actually took me. I still don't entirely like the grip of the mouse. The 602, it's hard to pick up with your fingers, whereas I had the MX1000 laser mouse, and that one was easy to pick up with your fingers. It felt comfortable. I really missed that mouse, but my right click
mine still works.
My right click button broke. It just stopped functioning properly after millions of right clicks in Diablo and stuff. I think Diablo killed my mouse. That I should hashtag that. I'm sure if anything, Blizzard would be proud of that hashtag.
Mine actually still works. I started having trouble with it, but I gave it a full cleaning, including on the charge contacts, and which is the biggest problem, and got mine working again.
Yeah.
So I still have it working. It's actually sitting in its little charger behind me.
Maybe I'll steal
different computer.
Maybe I'll steal it from you. If it's not there one day, I didn't do it. So you know.
But I need it for that computer.
All right. And
anyhow,
the next thing that's of interest is going to be the 3dRudder that they showed for the PlayStation VR. And basically, the idea is you put your feet on it, you can tilt it forward, back, left, and right. Of course, you're sitting down. You don't want to be standing on this thing like that old pogo ball or whatever it was that you'd pinch between your feet and bounce around. You remember that in like the 90s or 80s or whatever? That was.
Remember it, didn't ever use one.
Yeah.
I was too scared of those things. These are like the balance boards you might see like at the gym where you can get.
Yeah.
And while you could technically do that, it's going to be a lot harder to work with. Whereas if you're sitting down, it's a lot easier to deal with, because this thing is meant to not only, it's meant for like, you lean it forward, you move, your character in VR will move forward, back, you lean left or right, and you strafe that direction. If you twist you twist it, your character will turn. So it's a full directional on your character. Though for PlayStation VR, it's currently only listing as one game can handle it. However, the device can also work on PC. Either that or there's a PC version. One of the two.
There is a PC version. There's a PlayStation VR and a 3dRudder for PC. And that's out, and it's $99. Little pricey, but for what it is, it's cheaper than some of the like pedal and steering wheel combos that people get for racing games. So
At least
it's actually quite in line with some usual gaming accessories.
And at least on PC, we know that the list of games is a bit longer. And some of these games are, fairly large titles. I mean, we got, older ones like Borderlands 2, ones that technically haven't fully been released but are still in, the core in the works, like Star Citizen. They have
that
funny ones
infinitely in the works though, so I don't think that's a good example.
You have ones that are just been around forever, like WoW.
Yep.
And then there's specifically VR titles such as Skyrim, Fallout 4 VR, and Doom VFR.
I have a feeling though that this thing would work for anything that can use a joystick. Honestly,
it's very possible and apparently the system would recognize as another controller, and if you could figure out how to map it, maybe you could get any game to handle it.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting. Might be interesting. And if you have a 3D or a VR headset, definitely worth looking at, especially if you really hate using your hands for the wands and then having to deal with moving forward and back and whatnot with a thumbstick while you're dealing with pointing and shooting and stuff. So definitely worth a look.
I'll just go ahead and send that to a friend of mine, actually.
Well, and it'll give you a little bit more natural feel because as you tilt your feet forward and stuff, you're going to be moving forward. It's not going to be this usual thumbstick kind of thing where you're used to doing it sitting in a chair with a controller and not having that VR experience. So it might help with the little bit of motion sickness if you're prone to that.
And so it's an interesting little device and just another nudge in that direction. I'm still waiting. One of my colleagues at my work enjoys VR, and he's looking forward to having full tactile hand gloves, a la like Ready Player One.
Yeah, force feedback and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, that would be cool.
So plop on your headset, pull on your gloves, and go ham.
But unlike Ready Player One, he's not sitting in an Omni. He could be sitting on a chair with this board.
Yeah. So it's a step.
Yes.
So we have other devices out in the wild where they do have, like running boards and things that you can use to get moving around.
Yeah, the Omni.
But this is just a cheaper option.
Yeah. And some of us don't like exercise. So
well, I get exercise now.
Yeah, but you got a standing desk.
Yeah, among other things. But another thing that we came across was a little preview for Windows 10 on one of their next or upcoming updates.
Yeah, this was something that I wanted to mention because I deal with it every day at work. I mean, we have SSDs. They're not always the biggest SSD, and so everyone who's anyone likes to store crap on their desktop, which is the C drive, which is the SSD. And they come to me and say, why can't I save something on my computer? It's acting funny. Sure enough, they filled up their entire SSD with stuff off the network shares or who knows what, right? And so their computer is just not launching stuff. It's not being able to do anything. Well, Windows 10 Preview, the fast ring, gave people the ability to enable what they called reserve storage. And basically, this is a small section of the drive. I think it was about 10 gig, depending. That would be reserved. It
starts at 7.
Yeah, it starts at 7. But it can be reserved to store Windows updates, swap file, temp files, log files, all that stuff that Windows likes to used to operate for critical core components. So with this, hopefully, you'll still be able to launch Microsoft Word and not have a problem when they've filled up their entire C drive. You know?
Yeah, so there's a few options apparently how you, and it might be a couple of ways to configure it as to, so it'll determine how much space it will end up taking up.
Yeah.
But by default, once this update hits, it won't be there, so you'd have to turn it on manually. However, for anyone who's installing Windows as a clean install or pre-install, with this update already in place, this will be enabled by default.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about it going out and munching 10 gig of your existing Windows install, because it won't turn it on. You'll have to do it manually once you've ensured that you have the free space and such. But any new PC that comes from big box stores, that kind of stuff, that already have this installed, it'll be already reserved. You don't have to think about it or worry about it. Now, if they could only get the Windows side-by-sides folder to stop taking up 70 gig, I think that would be a good start too. If you ever want a reason to reinstall Windows or know why people reinstall Windows frequently on a cycle, the Windows side-by-side folder should tell you why.
Oh yeah, that thing is huge.
Well, if for people like us that are installing and uninstalling stuff all the time, or just have a lot of system and development components, then that folder gets really large really quick.
Or it just builds up over time if you leave your install going.
Yeah.
But that's something that will be out there. So for anyone who keeps up on the IT shop, it's probably going to be, something far more useful in order to make sure that your users don't do anything too stupid, at least when it comes to space. But there is one last thing I briefly mentioned, and this is more just something that I found fun. And this is something that's targeted directly at overclockers.
I think the KINGPIN name kind of gave that away.
Well, maybe. So if you don't know who this is, there is a group of overclockers. And there's a couple of them out there that are like, these guys are the elites. When you look at any of the benchmarkers who are overclocking everything and trying to put on the quote leaderboards, there's one or two names that are like always at the top. One of them is named KINGPIN, Vince Lucido, and he's been working with eVGA more recently, and he's helped put together a few rigs, and a lot of the stuff he's been doing has to do with using liquid nitrogen LN2, and he's been working with eVGA to make overclocker cards, overclocker motherboards. And so there's actually a couple of devices. One is a 2080 Ti that's built exclusively for really ramping it over the edge. Well, so I'm sure we're going to see some fun about this. I want to see how far it can actually go. And when we're talking about power usage, this thing has 3 8-pin ports on it.
Yeah, and it has a 19-phase VRM and hand-picked binned chips that have the best headroom for overclocking. You got all sorts of voltage measurement points all over the card, a BIOS selector switch in case if you really fry something. I mean, this is a pretty nice overclocker's dream card.
Yeah, when it comes, it's got everything you would want short of being able to directly inject LN2.
Yeah, it didn't come with an LN2 canister with thermal padding. Yeah. So, everything but that.
Take that. It's like, this is, I'm sure they've already had a few of these, things like this for sale before. So we'll probably see it eventually. But it's one of those things of, I doubt I'd be able to afford it. But if you're into overclocking, hey, there's a toy for you.
Yeah. I'll still take that steampunk card, though. 360 millimeter radiator.
And I also know that the KINGPIN also worked with them for a new motherboard that's also geared toward overclocking and rearranged some of the components for that purpose.
Yeah.
So if you're into overclocking, you're going to see some fun toys this year.
All right. Well, that's all that we have for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to tune in. And I believe CES has one more day left in it.
One more. So we don't know what we're going to see, since I don't know of any keynotes tomorrow.
You'd think they would have pulled everything out of their back pocket by now, right? But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. If anything comes up, we're going to have it.
Yeah, we'll bring up a final roundup, talk about the pros and cons, things like that. So be sure to stay tuned. Be sure to like and subscribe, hit that alarm button so you can check that when that next video comes out, be one of the first to comment, whatever. Give us some comments if you want us to cover any particular piece of tech. We can, by all means, give that a look for you and give you our opinion on it. We like opinions. But thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Have a good one.